Hello, everyone. This is Albert, pronouncing him his, and we are finally back with another video for the Race and Souls project. Um, I I apologize for the delay. It was just life has been lifing again for like the past 3 months. So I recently just got employment, so I'm like really just trying to get in the rhythm of like doing work and doing things outside of work, trying to occupy my time reading and things like that. And in the book that I'm about to like do is a very lengthy book that I'm pretty sure I have to do more than two, maybe more than three videos for. This is Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. This was a book that has been on my radar for years. I would say probably since 2020 or 2021 is when I've been starting to hear about this book and the relevancy of it and how real it is, even though it's speculative fiction. And I think it's worth noting how, especially the past couple of months and the dates that are on Parable of the Sower, are pretty spot on to like what is happening in our current situation, even though Parable of the Sower was published back in 1993. And to like give some backstory, Octavia Butler is from Altadena, California, where the recent California wildfires have been happening. And interesting enough, in Parable of the Sower, talks about is took place in Altadena, California. There's been a lot of fires going on, so I just and there was a recent election of a president that happened who has been having this type of persona and status that makes people not really trust in the political system. And I pretty much have no choice but to really get onto the Parable of the Sower train. And yeah, I guess we can get into it. And I think it's also worth noting that what inspired Octavia Butler to create this story is that she was following all the scientific research regarding climate change and the political response to climate change and natural disasters and the way people have been operating in community with each other and and I would say a lot of dystopian novels have been that this era of literature has been pumping out, because this is you I think this was assigned in a lot of high school classes because it of the relevancy and talking about propaganda and society and things of that sort. So that's what also drove me into the book, because I've read some dystopian novels when I was in high school, and I'm glad I got to the point where I have the time to read this one, because this book was a journey, I have to say. Um, so we can go ahead and start off talking about we're so to start off the book, we were introduced to Lauren Olamina, who lives in California. She's a high school teenager, and she has this superpower called hyperempathy, which she feels people's pleasure, she feels people's pain, and it's to the point where it kind of ignited her to have direct action to things. And it can also make her have you can say like she had like a lack of boundaries when it comes, because she was caring for other people so strongly that when it comes into the return, it's kind of a detriment to herself. So I think that's interesting for someone who's a teenager to have, because not a lot of teenagers, they start to grow into, they still going through the teenage angst and all that type of stuff. But for Lauren in particular, she has a different way of navigating around the world because of this power that she has. And she started off. It started off with. So this book takes place in and starts in July of 2024, late July of 2024, and then it ends in late October of 2027. So we're probably going to go through 2024 and 2025 events, and then 2026 and 2027 will be on other videos. So on starts with July 2024, in which we got introduced to Lauren Olamina, and she talks about a reoccurring dream that she's been having when she talks about being the daughter of her father, and her father shares the same birthday as her. Her biological mother passed away from drug addiction, so the fact that she and her father, they are very close in their relationship. They share the same birthday. They pretty much had each other from they had each other, and then her father went on to he got to meet this lady named Corey, who's she speaks Spanish. I think she's Latina, and um Lauren's father and Corey, they eventually got married, and then they have children of their own. So Lauren is the oldest sibling, and and she has half brothers. She has stepbrothers, and she's the only girl, and she's the oldest. So that kind of shows another dynamic into the family, because she pretty much has to also raise her brothers. She's been doing like a lot of the nurturing, the cooking, and the cleaning in the house to keep the household in order, because her parents are working parents. Her father is also a professor. He's a minister, and Corey, she's also a teacher. So she runs a school. So Lauren pretty much has to take on probably a lot of the burden of responsibilities in the household, because she's the oldest one, and I think that it also kind of shows how parenting during that time, and how parenting is when it comes to having to navigate all of these social struggles in society. And Lauren had to pretty much raise her brothers, and um, pretty much raise them to grow up in the house. And Lauren was talking about this reoccurring dream that she's been having, and this dream in particular, there was a random fire that's been roaming around in the house, and the fire came out of nowhere. And while she's doing that, she's learning to fly and levitate, and she's been trying to fly and levitate in this dream. And you can say it's kind of foreshadowing what's going to go on in the rest of the story if you've read the parable of the sower. And then she had another dream about stargazing with Corey. Um, and they were talking about stars are the window to heaven, and she was having a conversation with Corey, and Corey keeps talking about how much she misses the city lights back in the day, and she really missed when there wasn't a lot of changes going on in society. And I was thinking about, how when older generations, they talk about when they go outside back in those days and stuff like that, and they said they don't return home until the street lights come on. And Corey is kind of reminiscing about that time, and she kind of misses when there were actually street lights and stuff like that. But now they're in an environment where it's kind of unsafe to really go outside, because there's so much violence in the city. So it's kind of hard to really have a chance to explore the world in that way of a child. And there's no city lights anymore in the city, because there's so much different structural changes going around, and Corey misses those days. And then what I like about Parable of the Sower is that it's written as as if you're reading someone's journal, so it gives a more intimate, wet perspective of the character Lauren, and she has dates and like of when events have been happening. And she also got to talk about going to the church with her dad being the main leader of the church, the minister or some or whatnot, and talking about how his Christianity isn't my Christianity. We worship different gods because he's more of the, the mainstream of what Christianity proposes God to be as this, fear God, is more of a coercive type of approach to religion. And Lauren she's more into more curiosity, exploration type of things, which not a lot of room in like a lot of Christian spaces to do that, especially a Baptist space. Um, and she also talked about her brother Keith. I think Keith is the youngest child in the family. And Keith had all these aspirations to go to Los Angeles. And remember, this is Altadena, California, and which is it's not too far from Los Angeles. I think it's about 30 minutes away from Los Angeles. And Lauren was talking about how, and mind you, this was published in 1993, so it made me think about the Los Angeles riots that happened after Rodney King when Octavia Butler published this. So when the Los Angeles riots happened, that's a different type of Los Angeles that's been proposed in mainstream media. Because when people think of Los Angeles, they probably think about Hollywood. They think about the celebrities that live there, the glamour and the glitz and all of that. But Los Angeles riots showed that it's also a city that has a lot of poverty. There were poor housing conditions. There were a lot of drug addictions and alcoholism. And in the book, they talk about how one time they saw a headless naked woman, and content warning. There's like a lot of like sexual violence that has been mentioned in suicide that has been mentioned in the story. So there was the headless woman that was naked, and it's kind of needs to assume that she was sexually violated when they got to visit Los Angeles one time, and that stuck in Lauren's head. So that kind of stuck with her and her view of Los Angeles rather than what is proposed in the mainstream. And and to go to tie in with her hyper empathy, she also feels the pain of those that have been suffering in Los Angeles. She was talking about the diseases that's been spread, the pollution that's been going on in the city, the poor food and the food deserts that's been going on in the city, and she's been feeling the misery of the city, and she just and I was actually in a book club recently about this book. So I was arranging a book club, and one of the people, and it was people from grad school that I was talking to with, and one of my classmates was talking about how nowadays it's like kind of popular to say you're an empath, but it's like it you kind of it makes sense to really feel others' pain and stuff like that. But the way Lauren feels it is like I can't stop thinking about it. Like I have to do something about it. And I want to do something, and her way of doing it is to pretty much do what she needs to do, try to work with her community and check up on people and stuff like that. And and Lauren also talks about her father and how he portrays himself differently in the church than how he portrays himself at home. Because in the church, he's, the charismatic preacher who, mm, how and pretty much talks about how he's been chosen by God to like speak these sermons and stuff and whatnot. But at home, there was a lot of there was a lot of hardness, I would say. There was a lot of stoicism that her dad displays, because even though he's the preacher, he has a gun and he will use it if he feels attacked or something like that. Like he's in charge of like the night watch of the city. So he doesn't trust the police and stuff like that. Like, of course, because if you're poor and black in Los Angeles and stuff like that, 9 times out of 10 you're not gonna trust the police. So he created like his own they're policing the police. They're a night patrol that's been going on, trying to take care of everybody, trying to take care of people's gardens and things like that. And he's like, anytime there's like conflict and that's going on in the family, he wants to keep it in the family and not outside of the family. So when it comes to like conflict resolution and things of that sort, um that is something that Lauren is also working with, because she just knows she can't keep things in. She has to speak out because her hyper empathy makes her feel so many things that she has to address it somehow. And yeah, they also went into the backstory of Lauren's biological mother. Her biological mother is took this drug because she was a drug addict, and that drug resulted in Lauren garnering the hyper empathy skill. So I think what's interesting about hyper empathy is that you can like take it as a like a disability for Lauren, because she feels so strongly to the point where people aren't equipped to really know how to address the hyper empathy. So to society is deemed a disability, but and there's like something that should be done about it. But Lauren knows like this is something that is a part of her and she shouldn't be embarrassed to have it. So she never really has shamed of her hyper empathy. Um, and then there was a preparation, and then she was talking about how she was getting prepared for a baptism, and she had all these conceptions of God on pages 17 to 18. And I want to let y'all know that I got a PDF of the story, so I wanted to take the time to read it here. She says here on pages 17 to 18, the idea of God is much on my mind these days. I've been paying attention to what other people believe, whether they believe, and if so, what kind of God they believe in. Keith says God is just the adult's way of trying to scare you into doing what they want. He doesn't say that around Dad, but he says it. He believes in what he sees, and no matter what's in front of him, he doesn't see much. I suppose Dad would say that about me if he knew what I believe. Maybe he'd be right, but it wouldn't stop me from seeing what I see. A lot of people seem to believe in a big daddy god, or a big cop god, or a big king god. They believe in a kind of super person. A few believe God is another word for nature. Nature turns out to mean just about anything they happen not to understand or feel in control of. Some say God is a spirit, a force, an ultimate reality. Ask 7 people what all that means and you'll get 7 different answers. So what is God? Just another name for whatever makes you feel special and protected? And I think that's kind of shows you that Lauren has a different understanding, that where it can be, God can be interpreted in so many ways. There's a God in you. There's a God out there that has all these qualities that you can abide by and follow. And to some people, God is just simply the humanity and things of that sort, and how we take care of each other and how we take care of the environment and stuff like that. Kind of a holistic way of viewing the world and the universe, and how vast and expansive God can be. And that's how I see it. Like, God is expansive and very vast, and there's the really like the only people who can really speak for God is God, and it's really up to us to like how we navigate in the world on how do we show God to each other, the compassion, the honesty, the transparency, the safety, the love, and all that. Um, and I think that is it for that part. And what's going on in the next portion of the story is there was an astronaut that died in space. I forgot the name of the astronaut, but there was an astronaut that died in space, and it was interesting how the astronaut died in space while the government is talking about dismantling a space program. So it also and interesting enough, not too long ago, there was in the real world there was like a couple of astronauts that they either got lost in space or they they clearly died, and there's and everyone is trying to find a way how to return the bodies back to Earth, and it kind of shows and it goes into like the privatization of space exploration and trying to get into space colonization here, and there was a fascination with Mars and stuff like that. So like all of this is like timely if you've been paying attention to what this administration and the current political landscape is trying to do in regards to tech, the tech industry, because you can say there's no, you have to say that there's tech fascism going on and trying to deteriorate, literally neglect the earth, and letting climate change cause such disaster where earth might not be livable sometime. And the what the elites are saying is that we probably want to go out to Mars and see what we can do about Mars instead of actually taking care of Earth. So that's pretty much the most powerful statement that's been going on in this book about climate change and how society has been pretty much saying we should invest in space privatization and actually not and actually try to take control of the narrative on like what we're doing about this, because they're trying to justify space exploration and trying to justify going into Mars and trying to justify that there's nothing we could do about saving Earth. So that's what's been going on in this book. And she talked about water prices that have been increased. Their water privatization has gotten so bad that there are people trying to sell water, and you can say that that's going on right now. Right now, like people are charging, selling water for like $5 or something like that, and I'm like, water should be a human right. Water should not be privatized. Water should be something because we need water in order to live. We're literally made of water. um and she also talked about the cultural aspect of the day, how there's a clean and a dirty idea of fashion for survival. So we're talking about what's considered inappropriate clothing, what's considered appropriate clothing, and how that's styled in between different social classes and socioeconomic status. And she was talking about the Giannis household. The Giannis, and they are some neighbors in the community, and they have multiple businesses. Own a they mainly own a window company, and they have a movie library. So they have all these resources in the community, and out in the middle of Altadena, which is pretty impoverished, mostly working in low income, lack of income community. And she was and then we got into it talks more about the space this discourse on the space exploration, and talked about on page 24 about bread and circuses. And let me see if I can find it. Yeah, she was talking about Lauren's father and how he feels about politics right now. And Lauren's father said, "Breads and circuses," my father says, when there's space news on the radio. "Politicians and big corporations get the bread and we get the circuses. Space could be our future." I say, I believe that. As far as I'm concerned, space exploration and colonization are among the few things left over from the last century that can help us more than they hurt us. It's hard to get anyone to see that, though, when there's so much suffering going on just outside our walls. And I think, yeah, she also said, Dad just looks at me and shakes his head. You don't understand, he says. You don't have any idea what a criminal waste of time and money that so called space program is. He's going to vote for Donner. He's the only person I know who's going to vote at all. Most people have given up on politicians. After all, politicians have been promising to return us to the glory, wealth, and order of the 20th century ever since I can remember. That's what the space program is about these days, at least for politicians. Hey, we can run a space station, a station on the moon, and soon a colony on Mars. That proves we're still a great, forward looking, powerful nation, right? And I'm thinking, make America great again. That's literally what's going on. So it's like Octavia Butler is prophetizing what is going on right now. And she passed away back in 2005. But the fact that all this is happening, and she literally said 2024 to 2027, what's going on right now, um, right now, and this video is uploaded in 2025, and all this stuff is going on back in 2024, literally. And yeah, that's kind of this was so Lauren's father, he said he's gonna vote for President Donner. I'm gonna spoil, like he eventually didn't vote because he realized like Donner is a fraud. Actually, he's not gonna do what he's gonna say he's gonna do. But what got into his understanding is what made me think about when in Ruha Benjamin's imagination, another video that I posted. She talked about when the space landing back in the 1960s, how the first man on the moon, there was so much money to put into the space race to beat the Soviet Union and their competitive economics and education, that the United States had put so much money into trying to put a man on the moon. But there's black people that were trying to just do a cultural festival in Harlem because they realized they're all they got in the community. They don't have enough food. They need health insurance. They don't have a lot of job opportunities. And here the government is investing in a space program. So, and it made me also think about this call to abolish the Department of Education. Like, yes, there's a lot of issues with the Department of Education, but to actually like get rid of it affects a lot of low income working class people, especially black people, because there's things that the Department of Education, there's certain protections that the Department of Education provides to people to actually get access to education. But it's like at the same time, the Department of Education is in charge. Is like the reason why we have student loans and stuff like that. And there's literally a student loan crisis, and there's really the Department of Education is literally like, we need these loans for your college education and stuff like that. So it's like, I see why you have this such problem, but to the point where it's like we have to actually get rid of it. That is something to actually. There's like a lot of nuance in that discussion. So it's going on, and that's pretty much what's going on with this talk about space. And after that, one of the neighbors, whose name is Mrs. Sims, she was also an active member of the church that Lauren and her family go to. She shot and killed herself after her son's family died in a house fire. Because what's going on in Altadena is that there's been a lot of fires because California was going through such severe droughts. They didn't even have rain or anything like that because there was a lot of climate disaster going on. So it got to the point where she was so mentally deteriorated, and it's like interesting how in organized religion, and especially in what's being preached in Christian circles, how suicide is a taboo subject. Like, it's considered like a sin to kill yourself and stuff like that. And for this woman to like go through all she goes through, and she felt the need to kill herself because she's just tired of the pain and suffering that she's going through in the world. And her only son and their entire family has been killed because the government just does not care about the community of Altadena. That puts you at a place in a dark space, and literally can like lead to your that fate. And let me see if I seen anything. Um, Yeah, she talked about how Mrs. Lauren talked about how Mrs. Sims' death affected her. She said, I began writing this about Mrs. Sims because she killed herself. That's what's upset me. She believed, like Dad, that if you kill yourself, you go to hell and burn forever. She believed in a literal acceptance of everything in the Bible. Yet when things got to be too much for her, she decided to trade pain now for eternal pain in the hereafter. And that goes into show like how mental health and things like that is something that we really should prioritize, and we need to really check on other people and how they're going through incidents that have been really affecting them deeply. Um, and she talked about how she can't get Mrs. Sims out of her head because she's been a very present life and a community member in Lauren's life. Um, it made her like really thinking about religion as well. And what's interesting is that in the book she has these things called Earthseed verses, in which I tell you Earthseed is like another religion, a religion that Lauren came up for herself because the conventional way of Christianity and how people are taking how things can't be changed and God doesn't want things to change. And Lauren said God is change. She says here, God is power, infinite, irresistible, inexorable, indifferent, and yes, God is pliable, trickster, teacher, chaos, clay. God exists to be shaped. God is change. This is the literal truth. She said, God can't be resisted or stopped, but can be shaped and focused. This means God is not to be prayed to. Prayers only help the person doing the praying, and then only if they strengthen and focus that person's resolve. If they're used that way, they can help us in our only real relationship with God. They help us to shape God and to accept and work with the shapes that God imposes on us. God is power, and in the end, God prevails. So it shows you there is a lot of religious influence, and I think Octavia Butler, she was a former Baptist, but she's more into the spiritual realm of religion and not more into the organized, like you have to abide by this and this and this in order to succeed and prosper in that religion. And yeah, that was it for that section. And then she talked about, this was Wednesday, November 6th, 2024, which was the day of the last presidential election in real life. But this is the actual date in the book, because Octavia is paying attention to like how people are taken to electoral politics and stuff like that. And this guy Donner won the election. He's the one that wants to get rid of the space program, and he wants to put America back to a place where people are working, everyone is prospering, but he's also a puppet for the billionaires. um, he wants America to work again and stuff like that. It's like, this is so like Octavia, I want you to be wrong for once. So yeah, so Donner won, and he was talking about all these things that he was preparing to do, which he wasn't inaugurated yet. So these are promises. These aren't things that he's gonna actually do. So that's pretty much what's going on in that part. And yeah, so that is the end of 2024, and we're now in 2025. And 2025, it starts with another fire in a neighborhood that was started by a neighbor's 3-year-old daughter. The 3-year-old is named Amy Dunn, and she is the daughter of Tracy Dunn. And Tracy Dunn was sexually assaulted and raped by her uncle Derek, and there was like a lot of disorder and dysfunctions in a Dunn household. Like when it comes to family, it's there is like dysfunctional relationships and instability all throughout, and there was like a kind of a lack of care for the 3-year-old daughter, and I think also because was forced to have this child. It is like, I'm forced to be a mother and deal with this child, and it's like that's just so sad for Amy Dunn, who was only 3 years old at this time. Um, and then they and then Lauren talked about how Mrs. Sims got cousins that moved in, and I guess these are the cousins that were the beneficiaries or for Mrs. Sims' life insurance, because it shows like inherit how messy and family inheritance and all that is. Because it makes me want to get into a backstory into the relationship between Mrs. Sims and the cousins that moved in. Like, are they people that she is actually close to, or did they happen to get enough money to get lawyers to get the inheritance because her only son and his family passed away, so the inheritance can't go into the son and his family. So I guess, are they the next people to get that money? So they moved into the community, and Lauren doesn't really. She's like guarding herself when it comes to them, because she got the vibe that they're not people that she should be trusting. And after that, that section is when Lauren talks about the target practice that she's been having with people in the community. So her dad has been teaching her how to protect herself and self defense and all that stuff. So to prepare to protect herself, if anyone harms you, you have a Second Amendment right. Yeah, so this book is pretty much talking about self defense and stuff like that in an age where instability and disorder and violence is very common. Um, Mm, and she talked about how this target practice was like a rite of passage. So Lauren knows how to use a gun and knows a lot of knowledge about pistols and stuff like that. And she talked about another neighbor who's been in this target practice. She talked about this guy named Richard Moss, who's in a polygamous marriage. He has three wives. Um, and when we talk about like heterosexual men and polygamy, is like, okay, they can have you, but the women can't have other men, clearly. So it's pretty much an arranged, and I wonder like how much consent they were decided to like be in this marriage, because the women are young too. Um, Lauren also talked about the types of shooting targets and during the practice as well. And that also triggered her hyper empathy, because a lot of the targets that they were using were animals. They were targeting squirrels, birds, and dogs. So it's like, I was like, oh, there's no like a paper target or a dummy or something like that. And what I understanding is that it will make sense to kill something that is living. So when you actually kill another human, you don't feel as bad when you do the kill. And it's moving targets, life things that are moving, not things that are manufactured, and is like actually living things. So I think that is interesting. And she talked about how Dad and Corey are trained shooters, and she talked about self defense advocacy on page 49 here. Let's see. Yeah, and because they're a community that keeps getting oppressed by the police do not really care about the community. They don't really respond to their issues. She talks about her father has been saying the police may be able to avenge you, but they can't protect you. Things are getting worse, and as for your children, well, yes, there is risk, but you can put your guns out of their reach while they're very young and train them as they grow older. That's what I mean to do. I believe they'll have a better chance of growing up if you can protect them. He paused, stared at the people, then went on. I have a wife and 5 children, he said. I will pray for them all. I'll also see to it that they can know how to defend themselves. And for as long as I can, I will stand between my family and any intruder. Now that's what I have to do. You all do what you have to do. And that's what he said to the people, the neighbors that he was training, and why he got into self defense. And he's prepared to protect his family and stuff like that, but he also want his family to learn how to protect themselves. And yeah, it makes sense because their safety isn't really guaranteed 100%, especially if you're a teenager living in Altadena, California, because so much violence has been happening. Like, it makes sense to be trained to, like, use weapons and stuff like that to protect yourself because there's so much crime. Um, and there was a metaphor that was used on a dog um on page 50. Let me see if I can find it. And yeah, Lauren was talking about her youngest sibling Keith, because Keith has like a lot of resentment towards their dad because he feels like he's been too hard on Keith in particular. And Lauren says, I worry about the way Keith wants to get his hands on the guns. Dad doesn't seem to worry, but I do. There are always a few groups of homeless people and packs of feral dogs living out beyond the last hillside shacks. People and dogs hunt rabbits, possums, squirrels, and each other. Both scavenge whatever dies. The dogs used to belong to people, or their ancestors did, but dogs eat meat. These days, no poor or middle class person who had an edible piece of meat would give it to a dog. Rich people still keep dogs, either because they like them or because they use them to guard estates, enclaves, and businesses. The rich have plenty of other security devices, but the dogs are extra insurance. Dogs scare people. And that made me think about humans being used like dogs. Like, there are police dogs, there are dogs that are dogs are dogs tend to be the animals that tend to be controlled the most. And dogs, they only see what they see based off what is being told to them and stuff like that. Like, there's no really, like, no exploration. That dogs explore, play, and stuff like that, but they're trained to follow orders. And that's what I think. There's like a metaphor for people, especially the masses that only consume like mainstream media, corporate entities and stuff like that, and narratives and stuff like that, because of colonialism and how propaganda has been enforced on people. So that's what made me think about when dogs was being mentioned that way in the book. And I think that also triggered Lauren's hyper empathy, because Lauren got to actually shot a dog, and she felt the dog's pain. So she felt very, she was like, the emotions were like taking over her in that moment, where it's like, it makes sense to like being trained to shoot to kill, but I a dog being shot, it's like sad to watch. So especially for her being so young, it's kind of like a lot to take in. And that was it for that part. And then the next diary entry was talking about how suddenly there was rain after 6 to 7 years um of drought in California. Like, like California was didn't experience any rain for 6 to 7 years. So that, you can say, that's what caused all the wildfires that's been going on, because there were so many fires. There was a fire literally like every other day in Altadena, and all of a sudden there's rain. So that was something that Lauren doesn't get to see often. So I'm sure she was happy to like see the rain. And what's also interesting is that townspeople, water was privatized, and water prices are high and stuff like that. So people are using the rain to as their water source. They were using water to use barrels and pots. You were using barrels and pots to catch the water from the rain. So that was their source of water. And it was a lot of water. It was a lot of rain. So that was their their life source at that time, where they don't have to pay for it. Um, and then the rain was getting stronger, and Lauren was talking about enjoying getting soaked in the rain. And then while it was still raining, it was raining for days, like, because this is the most rain that they saw in a good minute. And the 3-year-old girl Amy Dunn was out in the rain, And she was playing and stuff like that, and I think Lauren was playing with her, and Lauren has like this attachment to the 3-year-old girl because she doesn't have a sister, and she was the oldest daughter, she's the only daughter, and she had to raise her brothers. So the 3-year-old girl is like, and she has an attachment to her, like she looks at her as like a little sister. But you have to take into consideration she's a like Lauren is a teenager, so she's not able to like really watch the to really have access to the three or to Amy as she probably wanted. But there was one day where Amy was out in the rain and she got shot and killed through a weakened metal gate. Um and when Lauren saw Amy's body, it put her in a very sad place because she felt so deeply. The hyperempathy kicked in again. And it was on page 64 where I really felt for Lauren. Um, yeah. She said, God, I hate this place. I mean, I love it. It's home. These are my people, but I hate it. It's like an island surrounded by sharks, except that sharks don't bother you unless you go in the water. But our land sharks are on their way in. It's just a matter of how long it takes for them to get hungry enough. And that pretty much kind of shows like a type of rage because of the hyper empathy. Like you should get mad at something like that because this is a child that got killed. Um, but it's even shown here that even though Amy got killed, it was like it didn't signify a change in the culture in the policies or something like that, and that made me thinking about the Sandy Hook shooting back in 2012 and talking about gun control and stuff like that. Like even 20 something elementary school age kids didn't move politicians to really do anything. So it kind of shows like the community is like at a place where they everything is like just fast, 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 and violence is happening every day where they don't even get the process to grieve and actually feel for a 3-year-old child that literally just got in this earth, that was literally just born. Um, so it was really unfortunate, and they talked about the aftermath of Amy's death. They said Amy got cremated. The funeral was on a Saturday, and Lauren, her hyper empathy, she was like trying to check on Tracy and things like that. And Tracy, of course, wasn't doing too well, but Tracy was like at a survival mode type of thing where she didn't even really get to process mourning her daughter. Um, and she also involuntarily had Amy, so it was like a lot of emotions that were going through Tracy's head. Um, and then Lauren, and she has a friend named Joanne who goes to the same school as her. And then one day at school, Lauren and Joanne were talking about like a lot of disasters, like they were watching the news and stuff like that. They were talking about a recent blizzard that happened. They were talking about all the shootings. There was a measles epidemic going on, and I'm thinking about there was literally a measles outbreak going on in Texas not too long ago. Um, there was a lot of poverty, all the pollution that was going on, and we're talking about who their parents are voting for, and talk about Donner and stuff like that. And Lauren, and I gotta say it was probably the funniest part of the story, but it's also like a serious moment. Lauren was trying to convince Joanne to really prepare for the end of the world. She was like, Joanne, there's so much stuff going on, and you I just want you to know, like, we should prepare ourselves for an apocalypse because like everything is in disarray, and we're just moving everything like as if it's normal and business as usual, and we just need to actually talk about this. And Joanne was actually like very scared and hesitant. It's like, why are you talking to me like this? Like, why are you scaring me, Lauren? And Lauren is like, I got this book about plant cultivation from my dad. I'm gonna give it to you. We should prepare for the apocalypse together. Like, we need to get ready for things to get down. Um, she was talking about how what they need to do to survive. Joanne clearly hesitated or something like that. Like, it's like, okay, this is all you're feeling right now, and are you really wanting me to forcing this down my throat? And Lauren was offering her just some skills and stuff like that, and Lauren referenced the bubonic, I think the bubonic plague. Um, and let me actually get to the part of the story where she was talking about, because she's talking about how people had to prepare for themselves for when the bubonic plague was going on, because the bubonic plague was killing a lot of people. Um, yeah, it was on pages 72 to 73. Yeah, they were talking about shootings and break-ins and stuff like that. And Lauren said, and that's what will happen for a while. I wish I could guess how long. We'll be hit and hit and hit. Then the big hit will come. And we're not ready for it. And if we're not ready for it, it will be like Jericho. She held herself rigid, rejecting. You don't know that. You can't read the future. No one can. You can if you want to. It's scary, but once you get past the fear, it's easy. In LA, some wall communities bigger and stronger than this one just aren't there anymore. And there's like a wall around Altadena because of so much violence that's been going on in the city. Nothing left but ruins, rats, and squatters. What happened to them can happen to us. We'll die in here unless we get busy now and work out ways to survive. If you think that, why don't you tell your parents? Warn them and see what they say. I intend to as soon as I think of a way to do it that will reach them. Besides, I think they already know. I think my father does, anyway. I think most of the adults know. They don't want to know, but they do. My mother could do right by about Donner. He really could do some good. No, no, Donner's just a kind of human banister. She said, "What?" Joanne said, "Well, what?" And then Lauren said, "I mean, he's like a symbol of the past for us to hold on to as we're pushed into the future. He's nothing, no substance, but having him there, the latest in the 2.5 century long line of American presidents, makes people feel that the country, the culture that they grew up with, is still here. That we'll get through these bad times and back to normal." And then Joanne said, "We could. We might. I think someday we will." No, she didn't. She was too bright to take anything but the most superficial comfort from her denial. But even superficial comfort is better than none, I guess. I tried another tactic, and that's when she gave her the book and like actually gave her like telling her what is prophesizing what's going to happen. And that made me think about when people try to do political education, like it's like good to like actually educate and inform people and make people aware of like how serious things are, but you really want to guide them and make sure you put like Skillshare or something like that, and give them be solution oriented is what I think this is supposed to say. Be solution oriented, not just recognize how everything is terrible and things like that. Actually try to give people a sense of purpose, and I think that will actually motivate them and inspire them to actually like do things. And after that, everything was like very funny going on after that. And then after that conversation and the school day was happening, that's when the rain stopped, because it was raining for 4 days. Like, California was going through a 6 to 7 year drought, and the rain lasted for 4 days, and it was the most rain they got. So that was interesting in that part. And then, as pertaining to Lauren and Joanne's conversation, it got into it reached into Amy's funeral, because this was when Amy's funeral was going on. And then Joanne's mother was talking to Lauren's father about how much Lauren said, Lauren is kind of scaring my daughter. Can you get on your daughter about that? And then Lauren's dad has been telling Lauren that you can't just scare people like that. And Lauren was like, I need to make sure she's ready and stuff like that. Like, we are really all we have and stuff. And we really need to take care of each other. And I think it would help Joanne if she actually tried to be proactive in what's going on in the world, because there's so much chaos going around. And then what I do appreciate about Lauren's father is that he understands where Lauren is coming from. He's actually like, because he can't say like you're being silly and invalidate her emotions, because he understands how chaotic the world is going right now, because he understands like this all this investment in this space, all this catastrophe and crime and pollution, and literally a 3-year-old child got killed, and we're in a funeral for a 3-year-old child. So he has that sense of awareness where he can't really, he has to be real with Lauren about it. And she was like encouraging Lauren that you should teach people skills instead of fear mongering, which is like, oh wow, Lauren's dad is actually very progressive, and progressive because he's like, he was thinking about voting for Donner, and I'm like, oh, but he actually wants, he's like he's a self determination type of person is what I'm getting. Like he actually wants people to actually take ownership and actually help each other and help themselves in the process. Even though in regards to electoral politics, he was probably not the most well versed, but he he has some utility in the community. And yeah, it was like on page 84. Um, I will say he was like telling Lauren, you don't know what you're doing and stuff like that, but he made her understand like she should be actually like, don't just leave her out there into dry and stuff like that. Actually be proactive and be available to her at all times when she's trying to learn what to do about plant cultivation. But bring my book back is what her dad is saying. Like we can actually do classes and actually get someone in the community to like train on plant cultivation. We get to do someone to do train them do martial arts and do some needlework or something like that, sewing and stuff like that. Like we can actually talk to people in the community to do things so we can actually prepare for a disaster to take. And I respect Lauren's father in that regard, because he's actually being real in that situation. And he encourages her to like go to like neighborhood association meetings. So he's like very active, and like Lauren said, like he was the only one that really voted in elections and stuff like that. So he's like very politically engaged and active. So yeah, I think that was it for that part. And what's interesting about Lauren's dad is that the sermon that he was preaching on that the next day was about Noah's Ark. And if y'all know the story of Noah's Ark, is when there was a major flood that happened, and Noah had to get his family and all the animals involved in to prepare for this flood, because God told them like, prepare your family and stuff like that, because disaster is going to be happening. And that's what's interesting. Lauren is a regular girl with a superpower, the hyperempathy, but she moves in the world like a normal human. But when God told Noah to get ready for things, no one listened and got a Noah an ark ready and stuff like that. So I think that's interesting that that's the message that Lauren's dad decided to um give. And after that, Joanne actually goes to that church and she heard the message and stuff like that. So that made her understand what Lauren was coming from, and they still are friends after that. So all the drama there's no more drama after that. And then Joanne apologized to Lauren about it. And then the next portion is when there were some garden thieves that was going around the neighborhood. So that's the time that they were getting ready to do a night watch and a put night patrols together in the neighborhood. And that and dad her Lauren's father was talking about trying to get a night patrol together, and but Corey, the stepmother, was like iffy about it, even though she's a trained gun owner. She's kind of like, I think we should get the police to handle that because, they're the police. And Dad was talking about, like, the police don't care about us. We really have to fend for ourselves at this point. And yeah, it was talking about the police and how sometimes people had to take matters into to their own hands to protect themselves and actually use their Second Amendment rights. And then the next part was when there were thieves that tried to steal Richard Ross's rabbits, and Corey and Dad were arguing again and talking about how they need to prepare for death, which is like, oh my gosh. And they were, yeah, yeah. Lauren's dad was saying, "Did you notice that every off-duty watcher answered the whistles last night? They came out to defend their community." And Corey said, "I don't care about them. It's you I'm worried about." And it made me think about individualism and only caring about the people that only matter to you and not the community, because you are in proximity with that person. And Lauren's dad said, "No, we can't think that way anymore, Corey. There's nobody to help us but God and ourselves. I protect Moss's place in spite of what I think of him, and he protects mine, no matter what he thinks of me. We all look out for one another. I got plenty of insurance. You and the kids should be able to make it all right if no." Corey said, "No. Do you think that's all it is? Money? Do you think?" Lauren's dad said, "No, babe, no. I know what it is to be left alone. This is no world to be alone in." There was a long silence, and I didn't think they would say any more. I lay on my bed, wondering if I should get up and shut my door so I can turn on my lamp and write, but there was a little more. "What are we supposed to do if you die?" she demanded, and I think she was crying. "What do we do if they shoot you over some damn rabbits?" The police. And Lauren's dad said, "Live. That's all anybody can do right now. Live. Hold out. Survive. I don't know whether good times are coming back again, but I know that won't matter if we don't survive these times." That was the end of their talk. I lay in the dark for a long time thinking about what they had said. Corey was right again. Dad might get hurt. He might get killed. I don't know how to think about that. I can write about it, but I don't feel it. On some deep level, I don't believe it. I guess I'm as good as denial as anyone. Um, yeah, so that made me thinking about the illusion of security and safety and how people are going to be in your life. So it made me think about how I'm thinking about like the COVID-19 pandemic and everything going on in the current administration with all these deportations of undocumented immigrants. Some people, even though all these things are happening to people, there are a section of people that really feel like they'll be okay in the situation. Like disaster isn't going to come in their front door, and that's what it takes for some people to actually act and move is when disaster is in their front door. But if you had actually care about situations and realize how all of these problems interconnect with each other because they are part of the system that is in control of us and oppressing us, then if you have that sense of awareness, you should feel mobilized and educated to actually act on these issues. Not just wait until it comes onto your front door and you're affected. That shows that you really don't care at things until they affect you. Um, and that shows like a sense of entitlement. And then the next portion, um, that is chapter 7. So I think let me see. Actually, let me see if I can put in some space for this. Yes, I can put in some space for this. So, Actually, never mind. I think I am going to stop here. Um, and I'm going to read this quote on page 100 because I think it's my favorite Earthseed verse that was in this story. Um, Let me see. Was it part of chapter 7? Oh, it is part of chapter 7. So I'm gonna stop here. So that was chapters 1 through 6. So I'm gonna make another video for probably chapters 7 through maybe 12 or 11. Um yeah, I think I might do that. Actually, no, no, I'm gonna not do that. Let me go ahead and try to get into the other chapters because when we get into 2026, there's actually not that many. Many pages left. So this is actually my favorite Earth Seed verse that was on this story. It said, "We are all God's seed, but no more or less so than any other aspect of the universe. God's seed is all there is, all that changes. Earth seed is all that spreads Earth life to new Earths. The universe is God's seed. Only we are Earth seed, and the destiny of Earth seed is to take root among the stars." And that kind of go into like the biblical reference of the parable of the sower, in which Jesus was talking to a sower who was growing seeds pretty much everywhere. Some seeds landed in the soil, some seeds landed in other parts where they can't actually grow, and that's literally the seeds are people and the environment and stuff like that. Like there are things where it's gonna thrive. There are places where it's gonna thrive, but there are also places where it's not gonna thrive. And we have to realize that we are all beautiful creations that are meant to live this life. And if we actually recognize that, then we actually can do something about it and actually embrace humanity for all it is. And then Lauren explained how she came up with the Earthseed name. She said, "I am Earth's." Yeah, she says, "I am Earthseed. Anyone can be. Someday I think there will be a lot of us, and I think they'll have to seed ourselves farther and farther from this dying place. I've never felt that I was making any of this up. Not the name, Earthseed, not any of it. I mean, I've never felt that it was anything other than real. Discovery rather than invention, exploration rather than creation. I wish I could believe it was all supernatural and that I'm getting messages from God, but then I don't believe in that kind of God. All I do is observe and take notes, trying to put things down in ways that are as powerful, as simple, and as direct as I feel them. I can never do that. I keep trying, but I can't. I'm not good enough as a writer or poet or whatever it is I need to be. I don't know what to do about that. It drives me frantic sometimes. I'm getting better, but so slowly. The thing is, even with my writing problems, never every time I understand a little more, I wonder why it's taking me so long. Why there was never a time when I didn't understand a thing so obvious and real and true. Here's the only puzzle in it all, the only paradox, or a bit of illogic or circular reasoning or whatever it should be called. Why is the universe to shape God? Why is God to shape the universe? All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. And that was a very powerful. I love those Earthseed verses because that's what makes sense to me and how I live life. And she uses old journals as time capsules, and I think this section is like Octavia Butler actually speaking and not like the character of Lauren. This is actually Octavia and how she processes her writing, why it takes her some time to like get into the writing because she really thinks about her craft. And I think that shows the importance of imagination and creativity, hence Ruha Benjamin, and how we actually have to take time into our craft to actually make people understand and connect with our work. And I think that really spoke volumes when Octavia Butler wrote that part. And they were talking about packing for survival. She was talking, and she was talking to her dad about a gun and moving north. Um, so that's like the idea of moving north because Altadena was going through so much. So Lauren was thinking about, how about we move so we can be in a better place? So let's move up north or something like that. And we're thinking like, how up north is she talking about? Um, and it says something about my job down here. I'm trying to remember. It was on page 107. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, Lauren's dad said, "My job down here is as secure as a job can be. There are no jobs up there," talking about the North. "Newcomers work for food if they work at all. Experience doesn't matter. Education doesn't matter. They are just too many desperate people. They work their lives away for a sack of beans and they live on the streets." He's pretty much talking about, I got no work up there that I can do up there. So keep dreaming. They said Lauren said, "I heard it was easier up there. Oregon, Washington, Canada." And then Lauren's dad said, "Close. You got to sneak into Oregon if you get in at all. Even harder to sneak into Washington. People get shot every day trying to sneak into Canada. Nobody wants California trash. But people do leave. People are always moving north. They try. They're desperate and they have nothing to lose. But I do. This is my home. Beyond taxes, I don't owe a penny on it. You and your brothers have never known a hungry day here, and God willing, you never will." So Lauren's dad is pretty much saying, we have a legacy here. We have too much history in here and heritage to leave this place. We have to stay here. So that's pretty much talking about the family history and stuff like that, and how Lauren's dad has an attachment to it where it makes sense to stay there. Um, and I'm trying to think. This was another Earthseed verse that I really like. It said, "A tree cannot grow in its parent's shadow." And I was like, okay, yeah, Lauren is saying, I have to have my own autonomy and agency and not abide by what my parents think. I can't just subscribe to everything that my parents believe in. And that's accurate. You can't live everything like what your parents believe in. They're going to guide you and raise you to be the person you are, but you shouldn't have to agree with everything that they believe in because you are your own person. And then they talked about Tracy Dunn. She was really depressed since Amy's death, and I think Amy's and Tracy Dunn's Amy Dunn's death really like finally got to Tracy Dunn. Like she finally got to the point where she is felt very sad about Amy's death, and she got very depressed where she can't really even leave the house and stuff like that. And then and then Lauren was actually trying to take care of, make sure Tracy has everything that she needs. So that goes into the community support, being there for your community, and social and emotional distress too. And Lauren turned 16 on July 20th, 2025. And she was talking about the destiny of Earthseed is to take root among the stars. I really like that quote too. Um, she was also talking about, since Donner has been inaugurated, how terrible everything has been already. It's like he hasn't been keeping his promises. And she said, "The world is terrible because of Donner and capitalism, yet there's so much to explore." Um, and then she was talking about some other neighbors that were, I think they're Hispanic couple. She said Bianca Montoya and Jorge Iturbe are expecting their baby. They are planning to get married and have children during the crisis. And then we're talking about why we're in literally chaos and crisis right now. This is not the place for to put a child in this situation. So that made me think about what was going on, and yeah, what was going on with all this disaster going on. And I guess the death of Amy Dunn made her think about that. Um, and then the youngest brother Keith left home. He was lost or something like that. No, he knew where he ran away because there was a lot of family distress and stuff like that, especially with his dad. The family's trying to search for Keith, and Keith came back without a key. And he was really bruised up and stuff like that. So he was pretty much hanging out with a crowd that he probably shouldn't be around. And he said he got attacked by 5 guys. Um, He said Dad left to retrieve the key, and Keith felt ashamed about it. And then what's actually sickening is that that following Sunday, Keith dad the dad, remember, he's a minister. His dad was calling Keith up to the congregation on a Sunday, so it was a packed congregation, and Keith was confessing his sins in front of the congregation, and Dad was pretty much putting shame into Keith and stuff like that to try to discourage him from continuing this behavior and trying to deter him from irresponsible activity. And Keith was talking about how he felt sheltered. And I can understand, he was the youngest child, so he's the child where Dad and Corey are used to. Like, they're used to they're pretty much experienced in their parenting that they felt the need that Keith is easy, but Keith ended up being the more rebellious one. Um, and Dad also preached about honor thy father and thy mother, the quote in the Bible and scripture, and thou shalt not steal. And it goes to show, like, sometimes those verses like those, people can use them to really take a dominant narrative and actually control people and manipulate them and gaslight them, when in actuality those aren't also always the best case, because some people, stealing is probably the only way they get food and stuff like that. Stealing is probably because they can't afford in a world where everything is unaffordable. And also, on the father and the mother, the amount of abuse and that's been going on with parents going like that, you probably want to not obey, because that's what as honor has been conflated with obedience. um and I think that was it for that part. And then more than a week later, Keith disappeared again because him and his dad got into it again. um and then dad was doing trying to search for Keith and stuff like that, and trying to manage everything. Lauren was helping Corey with her classes. Lauren was also like a substitute teacher for Corey's classes, because remember, Corey's a teacher. So so that's like, Lauren literally she literally didn't have a childhood. Like, she was really like taking care of so many things. She was like another parent trying to take care of everything. And it made me think, like, how, yeah, she didn't really get to be a child, and be a teenager. She had to grow up so fast. Like, she is very mature for her age and stuff like that, which is unfortunate. But it's the environment that she grew up in. And they still couldn't find Keith for the next day. And then this is where it got heated, because Dad came back and Corey said, if it were your precious Lauren, you would find her right now. And that goes to show, like, Corey got some feelings to let out, clearly, because remember, Lauren was the first child. So, but Corey kind of, what's interesting is that Corey gave birth to sons, so that can carry the family legacy when they get old and have children, to carry the family last name. So Corey felt a sense of entitlement when she had like a certain type of perspective in that regard. But she does not have that same attachment to Lauren, because of course Lauren isn't her child and she's a daughter. And it made me think about something about a quote that said, mothers love their sons but raise their daughters, and that raising doesn't come with the softness and the compassion for that daughter. And Lauren starting to question things and felt very guilty that Corey said that about her, because she said because that's what Corey said. um Yeah, she said, if it were your precious Lauren out there alone, you would have found her by now. You don't care about Keith. And that was like, there's a lot of things that need to be, there's a lot of therapy that was needed. But of course, they couldn't afford therapy. So they really had to solve things on their own, which is very unfortunate. And then over a week flew by again. And then Keith came back and he wouldn't say where he was. And I don't think, oh, the dad was there. And dad, once he saw Keith, the first thing he did was attack Keith. He was disciplining him because he's like, you can't follow my rules and you're running away, just doing any and everything. And here you are scaring me, so I gotta attack you. And I'm like, Keith probably got attacked by himself. Like, you can't like literally talk to him. The first thing you do is attack him. And then Lauren and her brother Marcus left the room. Marcus is another one of the brothers, and I think he's like the brother that Lauren is mostly close to. I think he's the second oldest child. And Marcus slept in Lauren's room because I think he shares the room with Keith. So that shows like it's just when it comes to conflict resolution, and you remember dad is the minister, and family business stays in the family, so he was handling the family business in the household the way he knows. Ow. And then, okay, this is the final part, and then I'm gonna stop this video. This is November 3rd, 2025. So Keith ran away again, but this time in November 3rd, he returned with gifts. And of course, since his dad attacked him, he probably doesn't feel safe and comfortable around his dad right now. And he knew his dad had to work during the time that he came back. So his dad was out when Keith came back and returned some gifts to the other members of the family. And Corey was begging Keith to stay. And Keith said that he promised he'll be okay, but he doesn't feel like this house is not a home, to quote Luther Vandross and Dionne Warwick. This house is not a home, and I need to be a place where I feel at home, and I need to get out of here because this is no place for me to actually feel like I can be the best person that I can be, because I'm going to be a disaster if I stay in this house for so long, and I didn't ask to be here. So Keith went on his way and left. And then there was a quote about, oh, never mind. That's part of 2026. So that is part 1. That was chapters 1 through 9 of Parable of the Sower. I'm going to do another video another day for the years 2026. It's probably going to be just 2026 because 2027 is like where everything fell apart. And we reached the end of the climax. After the climax, that's the turning point of the story. So yeah, stay tuned for the other parts. And I gotta say, even though this book, it was very engaging, there was so much to process, and as you can tell, it's almost an hour and a half of this video, and it's like, wow, this is such a very intense story where it's so relevant, it's so relatable, and you get a sense of even though it's like very very hard to like see, like everything is so terrible going on, but Lauren's hyper empathy and her personality and the way that some people are trying to respond to the crisis of the situation gives you like a sense of hope. It leaves you to like really thinking about what would society look if it actually invests in care for its people. So that's what I got from Parable of the Sower so far when I got to this part. But it also goes into like talk about family dynamics, climate and disaster capitalism, and how political education and actually self-determination and community work is literally how people survive and get through every single day, especially in the midst of such chaos like these fires, the political crisis, the theater, and all the crime and robbery that's been going on in Altadena. But yeah, stay tuned, and I'll catch y'all another time on another day for a video. Because yeah, as you see, I can ramble about this, about everything that's going on in this story. But make sure y'all follow my raising souls on Instagram, and take care. And I'll see y'all later. All right, take care.